You're now listening to the Engage the Rockies podcast, your go-to podcast for local and state issues concerning Colorado.
Rose Pugliese was elected to the House of Representatives in 2023 for District 14 and is now the House Minority Leader. She was previously a two-term Mesa County Commissioner. She's celebrated for her significant contributions to enhancing government transparency and fostering bipartisan cooperation. As a first-generation American, she proudly holds a Juris Doctorate degree and operates her own law firm. In addition to the rewarding role of being a single mother to two children, she remains steadfast in her commitment to her community and her constituents.
Hi, Rose. Thanks so much for being here.
Well, thank you, SJ. I really appreciate the opportunity.
So it has been a while since the session ended. However, as minority leader, you're still going.
Yes, absolutely. I don't think people realize, when session ends, it doesn't end for leadership and especially the minority leader. So right now I'm recruiting candidates for seats for 2026, talking to donors about the session, trying to raise money for our candidates, especially our competitive seats. And then we still have staff at the office. And so I have to go into the office once a week, check in on staff, make sure that they're supporting our members, that our members feel supported, especially because we have a lot of new people. And so making sure they understand that we are still here for them and still working for them in the interim is really important.
Wow, that's awesome. Well, we appreciate your service. So take me, like I said, it has been a little while, but it's still worth, and especially a little bit of distance from the session, it's worth reflecting back and sort of seeing what happened. Would you take us through that, please?
Absolutely. So our caucus message on the very first day of session, I laid out what our caucus platform was, and all of our caucus platform was based on the conversations we had at the doors with people, what they wanted us to bring forward. I know I was talking to someone recently about, citizen legislation and legislation that's coming from our citizens. And I said, actually, our Republican House caucus platform was all about what we heard at the doors. Those are the bills that we brought forward, and some of them are successful and some of them weren't, but it was really important that we brought the voices of the people forward and that the people engaged. So our platform centered on affordability. It's the number one issue in Colorado. It continues to be the number one issue in Colorado. People can't afford to live here. They can't afford to raise their families here. And we have seniors who are really nervous about things like fees that the Democrats had put on them on increased fees for assisted living facilities. And we have seniors who want to stay in Colorado and they don't know if they can afford to live here anymore. And so those are the issues we tried to bring forward around affordability. Dan Woog, Representative Woog, in one of our competitive seats, brought forward a bill around the retail delivery fee. It's something that we've heard at the doors for years and continue to hear at the doors. And trying to repeal that retail delivery fee that everybody hates. Obviously, that failed in committee. I tried to bring forward a grocery bag repeal bill to repeal the fee on grocery bags because that was a number one issue at the door. People really hated it. It really affects our lower income folks who don't have transportation. And if they forget their bags, it's an increased cost. And so we wanted to bring those conversations forward. Again, that didn't get out of committee either, but it's really important that we bring the voices of the people forward and that the people know that when we knock on the doors, we're not just, showing our faces, but we're actually listening and then bringing forward the bills that are important to them. So affordability was definitely number one on that list. And protecting the Taxpayer Bill of Rights was another big one we heard at the doors. And we saw since Proposition HH, it has been a real topic of conversation. And so the Democrats had brought forward a resolution to challenge the constitutionality of Tabor decades after its passage. And what they found was, through Republicans and the fights that we had this session, that we were able to back that off. And that resolution wound up never coming to the House floor. And there was a reporter who asked me, why do you think Republicans should take credit for that? You're just the minority. But we have a loud voice as the minority. And we are able to really connect with the people and bring their voices forward. And we heard from the people, and we encourage Democrats to also talk to people. And so I think what we saw this year, and we'll talk a little bit more about this, but what we saw this year was really a deeper engagement by our grassroots activists. and also being able to bring some of these issues directly to the people. We did it on Proposition HH. Senator Kirkmeyer and I were the co-chairs of that effort to defeat Proposition HH. We traveled the state talking about it. And what we found was we really were able to engage our grassroots networks. The people, we need to educate the people who come to the town halls at 9 a.m. on a Saturday to talk to their friends and neighbors who don't. And so we saw that around the parental rights fight. 1312, everybody knows that bill. It is a huge topic of conversation and continues to be. And while it came out in a different form, and that is because of our grassroots activists, over 700 people came to testify and be engaged on this issue, and it got national attention. And I'm so proud of our caucus members for really engaging their networks, because that's really how we got the word out. But that bill looks completely different than it did when it went through the House. And that's because of the grassroots outreach. It was a bridge too far. If you're going to actually have a judge be able to take your children away in a custody battle because you don't subscribe to a certain ideology, that's a bridge too far. Government raising our children, as opposed to us being able to raise our children with our God-given rights to raise them in accordance with our values, it was a bridge too far. And it didn't matter if you were Republican, a Democrat, or unaffiliated, or whatever party you were. It was an issue that transcended party lines. And so parental rights was a huge issue this session. Another one that we laid out on the first day as our platform, that we were going to fight and protect parental rights. And so our caucus members, again, I'm so proud of them. They were really able to engage on that level.
So 1312 was signed by the governor, but in a different form. So section, and I don't remember, and I don't think anyone cares which section was what, but the part about the parental, a parent's child being taken away was taken out. And yet I've heard that there are still other bits in there regarding dead naming and that type of thing. Could you sort of give us a little overview of that?
Chosen name is still part of that bill. It's not in the discrimination section, but it does, schools still have to work with students on their chosen name. That kind of dovetails with the bill that was passed last year around non-legal name change in schools. And so I know I get a lot of questions from our school board members about, how does this affect us? And so obviously I don't give legal advice, and I tell them to consult their attorneys, but making sure that parents are engaged. There's nothing in there that says parents can't be notified. And so I do think it's really important that parents engage with their school board members and make sure that their policies reflect that parents need to be notified, and they need to engage with parents, especially with children around chosen name. I think the other part that's really affects public safety is you can now change your gender on your birth certificate 3 times without a court order. And so, it's interesting, right? So part of the bill that had gotten taken out was around the child custody piece, but then this part was added in around changing gender without court orders. I think that really does put our community at risk, because now you can't trust government documents, right? Government issue documents are supposed to be the ones that we all can rely on, that our clerk and recorders can rely on. And now we don't know if that information is going to be accurate or not, and there's no court order process to make sure that it is. And so I think that's opening up a can of worms that we all need to be really aware of. And I feel like it wasn't really stakeholdered, right? Because the bill as it came through had a lot of community engagement. Well, they made a lot of those changes on the Senate floor. And when they do that and not in committee, it's harder for people to be able to testify on those issues or to even understand. I'll be honest with you, we spent a day, our House caucus, as we were preparing to debate, to really understand what the bill even looked like. And that wasn't stakeholdered with the people, that the voices of the people weren't heard on those issues. And so I think that it really does open the door to a lot of issues. Obviously, there's litigation happening right now around 1312. We've heard and seen that. So I think it's just a bad precedent.
At the camp, I think it's Camp Idrahaje, is that 1312, where the basis that they're suing because it's a religious camp and doesn't want to have boys and girls cabins and vice versa?
I don't know if that's part of that lawsuit or if that's a different lawsuit. So I'm not bringing the lawsuit, so I don't really want to speak on behalf of the people who have brought it forward. But I know that is a huge issue that my constituents have brought to me as well, right? I think that really parents are just really fed up with the government really being engaged at this level with their children and being able to say what restrooms they can use and our children not feeling safe. And that's what we're hearing more and more, not just from the parents, but from children and not feeling safe in their communities. And so I do think that we have to continue to speak out. Hopefully litigation goes well. You just never know with how litigation is going to end up. And, I always tell people bad bills don't go away. They just come back next year in a different form. So the battle is still occurring. We won part of the fight as far as the parental custody piece, but that doesn't mean it won't come back next year. And so I think it's really important that our grassroots community continue to be engaged, to talk to your friends and neighbors, the people, it's so easy to talk to the people in the echo chamber, right? It's so easy for us to talk about these issues. But if the people outside of our groups, our circles don't hear this information, then they'll never be able to engage at the level that they really need to. And I think that that's really important. So grassroots engagement is going to be incredibly important, even in this interim. Just because we're not in session right now doesn't mean that we can't engage and continue to educate the people on the bills that came forward or the ones that didn't. I mean, challenging the constitutionality of Tabor. I think that people need to know that that was an intent of the legislature, of the Democratic, controlled legislature. And again, these things don't go away. They just come back in a different form. And so we need to be ready.
The Republican caucus had quite a hand in changing that Tabor, and it was a bill, but it was very confusing for most people that are not up at the Capitol, understanding what the heck that was going about. It's like, well, wait, you want to use the taxpayers' money to sue about this? It just didn't make any sense.
No, I agree. And we tried to put an amendment. We had talked about putting an amendment on that said you can't use taxpayer money, to sue the government about Tabor. But it was challenging the constitutionality of Tabor. It would have been a resolution, and it would have given the legislature the authority, the big legislature, the authority to go to the Supreme Court and ask for a ruling on the constitutionality of Tabor. But because we were such loud voices, because you all got engaged, it was really important for Democrats to continue to hear from the people. And so that resolution never came to the House floor. It was never debated, and it wound up dying on the calendar. And so I think it's a real credit to, obviously, our caucus. We fought loud and hard, but having the grassroots behind us, with us, and being able to be their voices was really important.
Well, at Engage the Rockies, we're all about engaging and helping people understand what a grassroots fight is about. So Tabor and 1312 weren't the only things. Maybe you want to talk to us a little bit about SB.
So Senate Bill 3, that was a really interesting one. That again morphed into a completely different bill. But now you have to have 12 hours of training in order to exercise your constitutional right under the Second Amendment when it comes to purchasing certain firearms. Again, a bridge too far for so many people. I would say between 1312 and SB 3, that was the most constituent outreach I had received from across the state. And people saying, don't take away our Second Amendment constitutional rights. It wound up going through. And we, the Colorado House Republicans, we had tried to do a resolution asking the Supreme Court to look at the constitutionality of Senate Bill 3 before it finished going through the process, before it even made it to the governor's desk. The Senate Republicans tried to get that resolution through. It did not go through, and the Senate Democrats did not allow that resolution to go through. And so the Supreme Court never had their opportunity to weigh in on whether this is constitutional while it was still going through the process. The bill was signed into law, and our Republican House caucus then sent a letter to the U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi asking for the Second Amendment Task Force on the federal level to review it for constitutionality. And, they're reviewing lots of these different state laws to see if they're in compliance with executive orders. And so we're really hoping, we know that they have received our letter and that it's under investigation right now. And so we're hoping that maybe some federal intercession might be necessary in order to protect the Second Amendment rights of our constituents.
That's quite serious. I have heard that there are lots of lawsuits and that this is very much of attack on the 2A rights, and certainly at Engage the Rockies, we believe in individual freedoms. So what were some wins? I know you kind of highlighted those a little bit at the beginning. I did hear that he didn't sign the Uber and Lyft bill, which I was thrilled about. We can still Uber in Colorado and Lyft. But talk me through some of the things that, and maybe that is the focus in your particular viewpoint of what you didn't let through as opposed to what got through. But talk about a little bit more about wins.
Absolutely. One of the biggest wins, I think, is that we had a very unified caucus, Republican caucus, and that we fought on the issues that were really important to the people and bringing those voices forward. So I want to start there. I mean, we could talk about individual pieces of legislation as well. We're able to make some amendments, but not a lot of amendments. And some of the bills that you all care about, still got signed into law. But I do think a big win is unifying our caucus and continuing to be the voices of the people throughout the state. I think that was a huge win. I think we were able to really bring forward, being able to stop the constitutionality of Tabor resolution. That was really important. And that was a lot of work throughout the session where every opportunity where we had the opportunity to talk about the Taxpayer Bill of Rights, we did. And we brought it forward and we highlighted Proposition HH because the Democrats had a huge loss on Proposition HH, 60-40, and the governor put a lot of money into that proposition and it did not pass. And the people said no. And so we highlighted that every opportunity we could because it was really important that leading up to this constitutionality resolution that we had our voices on the record. So I think that was really good. I think we were able to bring forward issues around affordability. Representative Gonzalez brought forward a bill around cage-free eggs, and we did a lot of repeal bills. The question that I get the most from my constituents is, do we really need more laws, or can we start rolling back some laws? And every year I bring forward, since I've been a legislator, I've brought forward a bill to repeal something that I heard at the doors. First year was retail delivery fees. The next year was green energy codes. And this year was the grocery bag fee. I think, again, bringing forward the voices of the people. And I really appreciate organizations like yours, Engage the Rockies, where you really are trying to engage and really are trying to get the message to the people who are not in our echo chamber so that they can tell their friends and neighbors. And so I think we're doing a really good job of starting to use our social media, use our friends to engage with people on a larger level and continue. One of the other things we did that I love this year, I wanted to bring forward all of the fees that have been put in place within the last year and this year. And so on our House Republican social media, we highlighted a fee of the day and highlighted, the assisted living facility fee. Most people don't know that that was passed and that it's increased costs on our senior community. And so when I tell seniors about that, they're very upset about it. So making sure that people understand some of the legislation the Democrats have passed and putting it at their feet, that Colorado is not affordable, that our communities are not safer because of the legislation that the Democrats have put into place. And hopefully we'll be able to change that narrative in the 2026 election. But making sure that we can engage the people, I think, is really important.
House representatives are elected for 2 years, senators for 4, and a certain portion of the senators every other. So in that the second session of an election cycle, is that more or less? And explain that a little bit in terms of often we see things when it is a newly elected group, whereas when just some of the group changes, it sort of changes the atmosphere of that session.
So I would say, the House has had a lot of changeover even since I've been there. There was a huge turnover when I came in. This is my third year. And then this year we had a huge turnover as well. And so I think on the House side, you see a lot of different and new ideas, maybe that are a little bit different. I think the Senate and the House have been very aligned on their messaging. I really credit Senator Lundeen as the minority leader of the Senate and myself working together to make sure that our messaging is consistent and the same has been really important as we help lead our caucuses. And I think we've had more engagement than maybe prior years, which I think has been really good. The Senate hasn't seen as much turnover, so I think they still listen to the voices of the people in the same way that we do. And again, making sure we have that consistent messaging has been really important. But you definitely do see it's a little bit different work, not harder necessarily, just different work on the House side because we had so many new members. So getting them accustomed to the legislative process, helping them build those relationships, because we're still in the minority, right? 43 to 22. We gained 3 seats last year. That's been incredible. We've got 3 really incredible members, but we need to also make sure that the new members are able to build those relationships that they need across the aisle. And I know there's some people who say, we don't want you to work across the aisle, but there are good pieces of legislation that we are able to get passed that do help the people in our districts. And so I think being very mindful of what the people are asking us to do is also important. So trying to build those relationships has been a big focus of us on the House Republican side.
Awesome. So talk me through 2026. It's sort of hard to believe that in the summer of 2025, we're talking about an election that is well over a year away. But talk me through a little bit of that.
Absolutely. On the House Republican side, we won 3 seats last session, and we are incrementally trying to build back to restore balance in Colorado. That's really our goal. I'm not promising anybody that I'm going to be the Speaker of the House. I think incremental has been really good, and we've been really honest with the people about that. And so our biggest challenge, I think, 2 of our 3 seats that we won were recounts. Rebecca Kelty in Colorado Springs won by 3 votes. So if you think your voice doesn't matter or that your voice doesn't count, that is absolutely not true. Every vote counts. 3 votes, that's like 1 household. And so making sure we get people to engage, as you all are doing, showing up and making your voice heard, I think is really important. So making sure we can keep those 3 seats. We can't go back into the super minority. We broke the super minority, and so we can't go back. So holding those 3 seats are going to be the most important, and then hopefully gaining a few more seats as we start to move towards restoring balance. That's really our goal. We don't have targeted races right now. We're going to be very data-driven on which races, and that can change. But I'm in the process of recruiting candidates right now to make sure that we at least have candidates in seats and that people who really want to run know that they have the opportunity. And so I spend a lot of time right now in this off session being able to talk to people and really engaging.
So I guess that would be my final question to you. And we've talked about this before, but it always bears repeating. If someone wants to get engaged, says, I couldn't possibly run for office. Like it seems this monumental task. What would you say to that person?
Running for office is hard work, but I think it's a really incredible challenge. And I think it's a calling. I always say, God put the 22 of us together for a reason. We all have our strengths and the opportunities that we can bring forward as far as making our caucus stronger. And so I want to continue to add to that. So I tell people, if you're interested, obviously reach out. I will sit down, leadership will sit down, kind of walk you through the process, make sure that you feel like you have the support, and make sure that you also have resources that you can rely on. As the minority leader, I don't engage in primaries. I feel very strongly about that. But obviously we need people to be running. So I'm happy to sit down with people and to make sure that they have resources, and I'll sit down with as many people for a seat as approach me. So I think that's really important. And then I also think making sure that honestly, I think prayer has a lot to do with it. Making sure your family can be prepared for a journey like this. Campaigning is hard. I'm a single mom. I raised 2 kids all by myself, and it's challenging. It's challenging to raise kids and serve the people of your community. But I think it's really important, and they understand the importance of protecting kids and families and making sure Colorado is affordable again.
Wonderful. Well, I really appreciate your time, Rose. Thank you for that synopsis. Glad that you, at least it's not every night until midnight now, a little bit later, but still lots of hard work. And we do appreciate your service.
Well, thank you so much. And thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you for listening to the Engage the Rockies podcast, your go-to podcast for local and state issues concerning Colorado.